This is BBC News. I'm Sean Lay. The headlines at 10. Jeremy Corbyn says Labour faces an historic challenge to win back power at the general election. Theresa May says she's not taking anything for granted. A penny on income tax to generate billions more for the NHS and social care, a pledge from the Liberal Democrats. French presidential candidate Emmanuel Macron says he's the target of a massive hacking attack the day before France goes to the polls. Determined to get back behind the wheel, the teenage British racing driver who lost both legs in a Formula 4 crash.
I definitely want to take the positives out of this and make sure that I use it in a positive way for the rest of my life now. Still got a few years left in me for sure.
Also in the next hour, the boogie wonderland of bakers hoping to rise to the occasion. Choreographers get in on the mix at the first ever National Festival of Making. Chelsea on the brink of winning the Premier League title after Spurs last night. And the travel show heads to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. That's in half an hour here on BBC News. Hello, very good morning. Welcome to BBC News. Theresa May has sought to play down talk of a landslide general election victory next month after the Conservatives made major advances at the council elections. The Tories gained 500 seats and seized control of 11 councils, with gains mostly coming at the expense of Labour and UKIP. The Tory leader said she would fight for every vote on the 8th of June to strengthen her hand in the forthcoming Brexit talks. Labour's leader Jeremy Corbyn says his party faces a challenge on an historic scale, but he insists he could close the gap with the Tories. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats have said this morning they'll raise income tax by a penny in the pound if they win the general election to raise £6 billion for NHS and social care. Well, the Conservatives did well in the vote for 6 metropolitan area mayors, and although former Labour Cabinet Minister Andy Burnham won Greater Manchester, the former retail sector boss Andy Street, who used to be in charge of John Lewis, was the victor in a tight contest with Labour for the West Midlands area around Britain's second city, Birmingham. He says he hopes the government will continue to invest in that region.
The good news is that in the deal that was struck between the West Midlands and central government to set up the mayoralty and the combined authority, we did get substantial new money. So yes, we can make a good start with the money that we've already won. But another thing the mayor has got to do is champion this region and say there is a brilliant case for central government continuing to invest in the West Midlands. So yeah, of course I'll be talking to the Prime Minister about that.
West Midlands Mayor Andy Street. Labour's national campaign coordinator Ian Lavery has admitted the general election will be challenging. He says the party will be talking and listening to people. And speaking on the Today programme on Radio 4, he rejected the idea that the new mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, had snubbed Jeremy Corbyn by not appearing with him at a rally in Manchester.
Jeremy did exactly what was expected of Jeremy. Because Andy wasn't there at that particular time, I'm not sure why, but I've got to dispel this myth that there's a rift between Andy Burnham and Jeremy Corbyn, because there simply isn't. They're quite good friends. Andy actually served in the Shadow Cabinet. Yeah. For Jeremy Corbyn, right up till the time where he decided to seek nominations for the mayoral contest up there in the northwest. So that isn't any way is there any rift between Jeremy and Andy. That's just simply not true.
That's Ian Lavery, Labour's election coordinator, speaking a little earlier on the Today programme on Radio 4. With me is Matt Cole, our political correspondent. Matt, now the dust has settled from those council elections and the mayoral polls around the country. What picture does it paint of the UK political scene and indeed the battleground for the general election?
It's thrown up some interesting results, not least that West Midlands Metro Mayor, a crucial battleground area, the West Midlands, some very tight seats. Labour would have really hoped to have taken that, quite a blow not to. Interesting, we'll be seeing some of the big party leaders in that broader region today, I think, trying to capitalise and boost their support. But we must be very careful with the local elections, not to read too much into the general election. People vote perhaps on local issues. Voter turnout is different than in general elections, but with that caveat, the broad general thrust of the results suggested that the Conservatives are on for doing very well indeed. Labour less well. Although, small bit of hope for the Liberal Democrats. Their share up significantly from where opinion polls have been suggesting they are. Different, of course, from UKIP. 146 seats defended, 146 seats lost. So not good for them.
Very interesting, the UKIP effect, isn't it? Because I was talking to Rob Ford of the University of Manchester yesterday, who has charted the UKIP performance, the ups and now the downs over several years. And he said, look, there's evidence that the UKIP vote has switched the Conservatives. Maybe not all of it, maybe about half of it or slightly more has gone directly across this time. But the effect of that might be not only to reward the Tories with extra seats at a general election, but also actually to make the Lib Dems task that much harder in areas like the southwest, where they had been hoping that they would be picking up again parliamentary seats.
Absolutely. The Liberal Democrats were reduced right down from just shy of 60 seats down to 8 in the last general election. They picked up 1 in a by-election to go into this election with 9 to defend. Now, they would be hoping that many of those seats they lost in 2015 were lost to the Conservatives, now presenting themselves as the only real pro-Remain or pro-positive Brexit. I'm not sure how they'd want to phrase it, but versus the hard Brexit that people are trying to paint Theresa May seeking. Now, the Liberal Democrats would have hoped, but of course, if the bar has been raised that much higher, it is going to make it that much more difficult if UKIP's vote has just disappeared. Now, we haven't heard directly from Paul Nuttall, the UKIP leader, yet. He did put out a statement blaming their demise in the county council elections on their own success. He certainly seems to think that the Tories are benefiting from the furrow they have ploughed.
What about the risks here for the Conservatives that people look at their newspapers this morning and go, oh, well, it's all over, really, and maybe not only think I don't need to bother turning out on the 8th of June because she's got it in the can, but also that even some of the party workers become perhaps a little bit complacent about their prospects. How big a danger do the Conservatives think that is?
If you listen to the language of Conservative spokespeople who were out and about yesterday, they were talking down the fact that they had won 563 seats, and they were, oh, no, we couldn't read too much into this. It was bizarre. Yesterday we had Labour, who'd done pretty badly, talking up how well they'd done. The Conservatives, who'd done well in Wales and Scotland as well as England, saying, no, it's not so good.
Somebody's saying it's the best.
In about 4 decades.
Of a
governing party, that's right. For a governing party, best results in local elections for 4 decades, and yet they were sort of, can't take anything for granted, said Theresa May. That is a danger. It is theirs, many think, to lose this general election, and you have to make sure, therefore, you win it. You can't just expect that your supporters will turn out, that your voters will turn out, and indeed, that, I guess, voter apathy is a potential risk for them, because there are plenty of seats that are marginal. No one's quite certain how much the potential Remain vote could come in. Let's remember yesterday, most of the areas where there were big elections were in areas where people voted Leave, and therefore the impact.
Nothing in London, for example.
Absolutely, exactly.
Yeah.
So very interesting to see how that unfolds. Whether there is a sort of lingering Remain vote out, which will switch to parties or candidates they feel still reflect their hope of mitigating at least the impact of Brexit.
Matt Cole, fascinating stuff. We'll know in 33 days' time. Thanks very much. Well, the Liberal Democrats are today promising to increase funding for the NHS and social care by raising the income tax rate by a penny in the pound. Health spokesman Norman Lamb said the policy would allow £6 billion of extra spending on the health service each year and marked a clear distinction between the Lib Dems and the Conservatives.
The very clear political choice, and in a sense the Conservatives have been very clear they won't make this decision in their response to our announcement. But we are saying for the average worker this would be £3 extra a week. It's about the cost of, well, less than 2 coffees. And I feel personally that that is a price that's worth paying to ensure that our loved ones get the care that they need when they need it. I'm particularly passionate about ensuring that people with mental ill health get access to care when they need it. We're a million miles away from achieving genuine equality for people with mental ill health. There is so much that this country depends on with our NHS and our care system, and we are allowing it to decline without the Conservatives being willing to make the investment necessary.
That's Norman Lamb, the spokesman for the Lib Dems, and of course the former health minister himself. With me is George Stoy, senior research economist from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. George, thanks for being with us on BBC News this morning. Let's just look at this proposal from the Liberal Democrats first of all. What in kind of financial terms does it mean?
So this is a £6 billion rise for health and social care, with at least £2 billion promised specifically to social care. The £2 billion is about 10% of social care funding. £4 billion for health would be about 3%. So that's a generous increase compared to recent increases that we've seen, but against the historical long-run average, it's quite small still.
So in terms of kind of increasing the health service side of it first, does this compensate for the money in real terms that the health service has lost in recent years?
So there was some extra money coming in anyway, which would have just about meant that age-adjusted per capita spend, so that's spending per head, yes, taking into account that people are getting older, that would have been approximately flat over the last 10 years. This would increase that a little bit more.
Right. So it's a kind of it's modest increase on what the existing spending plans. Yeah. In terms of the breakdown between the different parts of the UK, we should be clear that the Lib Dems are talking about ring fencing this, kind of guaranteeing this money will be spent in health and social care, but presumably they can only guarantee that in England. Yes. Other parts of the UK, it would be up to them how they use the money.
Yes. So in England, it will go directly into the Department of Health budget and then also given to local authorities who are responsible for social care. Any increases in money there, and then in the devolved administrations, they'll have a choice how they use that money.
In terms of what the Lib Dems are committed to then, what is the effect on people's tax bills?
So about half of adults pay income tax in this country. So a 1p or a 1 percentage point increase at each rate of income tax would cut, on average, household incomes by about 0.6%. This would be mostly focused on people in the top 20% of the income distribution. There.
So it's progressive because yes, it is related to ability to pay in terms of income tax. And just to be clear, when you made the point about 1%, we're not talking about a penny increase, we're talking about a penny in every pound that is raised on income tax, just to be clear about that. What about the broader debate on tax in this election? We've had Labour saying, yes, it's prepared to put up taxes for what it calls the rich. And as it defines them, that's people in about 70,000 plus of earnings. We've had now the Liberal Democrats making this very specific pledge, which they say will be ring-fenced for health and social care. The Conservative line today is to say, we now know that if you vote for anyone other than Theresa May, your taxes will go up. Can we read into that the taxes won't go up under the Conservatives?
I don't know if we can read into that. So they haven't made a specific pledge, unlike last time when they promised that main taxes wouldn't go up. And in some sense, it's sensible not to pledge that you are going to freeze particular taxes because it ties your hands later on. I mean, it's interesting to see with the Lib Dem pledge that they've put the money towards health and social care. Yes. We know that in the long run, pressures on health and social care really are going up, and that's going to cause us to have tough decisions about how we fund that. So do we raise taxes or do we cut spending somewhere else? And
in terms of what the government has done over the last, well, we've had 2 years of Conservative-only government, we have had 7 years of Conservative, 5 years before that rather, of Conservative Lib Dem government. What's the record in terms of tax, in terms of cutting taxes or increasing taxes?
So tax share is actually at the highest that it's been for many years.
Right.
So many of these cuts that have come through have been coming through in cuts to departmental spending, but taxes haven't fallen for most people.
Right. George Stoy of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, thank you very much. That's a good bit of kind of expert, detached analysis to help us follow through this debate in the course of the morning. Thank you for being with us. Let's go to France now. The campaign team of the presidential frontrunner Emmanuel Macron says they've been the victim of a huge hacking attack. Thousands of documents were released online late last night. The campaign says genuine emails have been mixed up with fake ones. Voters go to the polls tomorrow when Mr Macron will face his far-right opponent Marine Le Pen of the Front National. France's Electoral Commission says any media publishing the contents of the leaked documents would face criminal charges. Well, let's go now to our correspondent James Reynolds, who's in Paris. James, I suppose that's the most interesting thing about the timing of this leak, isn't it? That it comes just before the rules cut in restrict debate. So in a sense, it's very hard for the Macron campaign to get out there and challenge some of the things people are now reading on social media.
Yes, the timing's fascinating. These emails, we understand, began to circulate on social media sites last night, and then at 4 minutes to midnight, just before the legal cut-off about campaigning having to stop, the Macron campaign issued a long statement essentially saying, we have been hacked. They didn't name who the hackers were, but they said that it was an attempt to destabilize the democratic election. Clearly, they will be worried about the impact. They have said that the documents themselves contain simple routine campaign communications mixed with a few doctored documents. Whether or not it will have an impact is very difficult to tell. The French media and other media here in France operate under election restrictions today and tomorrow, the day of voting. In other words, they cannot speculate hugely about effects on the campaign. Looking at French websites, the story is reported. It is there, but it's reported minimally. And a lot of French people are simply doing other things today.
Just in terms then of the period now that we're in, this period of kind of no campaign, and yet it must be a period of kind of intense political interest after such a long election campaign and such an unpredictable one as well.
Yes, it's fascinating for those of us who come to France, having covered other elections, where the razzmatazz and the debating carries on right until the person casts the first ballot. Here, there is this odd 36-hour quiet period, essentially, before people go to the polls, where people are meant to reflect without distraction. The problem this time round is that there is a distraction. There is this distraction of the campaign emails having been hacked. Whether or not that has any impact is a different question.
The Election Commission is actually meeting later, isn't it, to consider this? Is there any suggestion that they might be looking at some way of kind of allowing this information to be discussed in more of an open way, given those restrictions?
They've already said, they've already encouraged media outlets, advised media outlets not to publish the actual text of any leaked documents. So they already given their guidance on that. What they will decide after their meeting, we don't know, but their guidance has been issued.
James Reynolds in Paris, thank you very much. Now you're watching BBC News. Let's take a look at the headlines at 17 minutes past 10. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn says his party is facing a challenge on an historic scale if it's to win back power. He insists it can close the gap with the Conservatives. Theresa May has sought to play down talk of a landslide general election victory. The Liberal Democrats today say they'll put a penny in the pound on income tax if they win the election to generate billions more for the NHS and social care. French presidential candidate Emmanuel Macron says he's the target of a massive hacking attack on the day before people of France go to the polls. Right, now let's take a look at the sport prospects for this busy Saturday and at the BBC Sports Centre. Hello Mike, how are you?
Very good, thank you, Shawnee. I hope you are too. And everyone at home, thanks for that.
Good. Has met the party's new councillors in Glasgow. The Nationalists replaced Labour as the largest party in the city yesterday, although it fell short of winning a majority. Let's speak the Deputy Leader of the SNP, Angus Robertson, who says that the general election in Scotland will now be a fight between the SNP and the Conservative Party.
Tory is still a four-letter word in Scotland, and most people do not want to see a return of the Conservatives, and that's why we're going to be working very hard the length and breadth of the country to make sure that the SNP returns victorious in most seats, because we need to protect Scotland at Westminster. We see that the Tories are running rampant south of the border. There's not a snowball's chance in hell of the Labour Party winning the general election. So if we're wanting the strongest voices to stand up for Scottish interests and against the ever more rightward drift of the Conservative Party and its Europhobia, people are going to have to vote SNP in Scotland, and I'm confident that given it will be that two-horse race, it's the SNP that will win.
That's Angus Robertson talking a little earlier. Our correspondent James Shaw is in Glasgow. James, what is the sense in the SNP about their performance yesterday? Were they hoping for something better? Because they didn't actually end up winning control of councils.
They didn't win control of any of the 32 councils in Scotland, including Glasgow, although you have to mark Glasgow up as a victory for the SNP, because they did overtake Labour as the party with the most councillors, and they stand a good chance of forming a coalition in Glasgow, booting Labour out of power after 40 years that Labour have been in control of this city where I am at the moment. But I think there could possibly be some disappointment, in particular when you look at specific results around the country where the Conservatives have done really well in surprising places with deprivation like Shettleston in Glasgow or Fergusley Park in Paisley, and places where there are close contests between the SNP and the Conservatives, and most particularly probably Angus Robertson's seat in Murray. We heard him saying there that Tory is a four-letter word in Scotland. Perhaps a few years ago, if he'd said that, more people would have agreed with him. Now, maybe fewer, because the Tory vote is gaining in strength, it's consolidating, and in particular in his ward, the local authority elections this week, the Conservatives overtook the SNP in terms of percentage of the vote. So Angus Robertson would be right to be worried about his local contest and the kind of resources that the Conservatives might throw into that to try and take that scalp of the SNP's leader at Westminster. If they could do that, then they would claim that they were making significant progress in Scotland.
James Shaw in Glasgow, thanks very much. In Wales, Labour lost more than 100 seats. Plaid Cymru gained more than 30. The party's leader, Leanne Woods, says she's pleased with the results and that Labour's performance was poor.
It was a good day for Plaid Cymru. We're up 33 seats. We've managed to stem some of the advances that the Tories were hoping for in places like Denbighshire, Pembrokeshire, Wrexham, Bridgend. We made gains, and of course, whilst there was a landslide for the Tories in England, with them taking 65% of the available seats, in Wales they only took 15% of the available seats. So as far as we're concerned, it's game on for the next election. We're looking to take seats like here in the Rhondda, Llanelli, Ynys Môn, Blaenau Gwent, as well as hold on to the seats that we've got.
That was Leanne Wood, the Plaid Cymru leader, speaking this morning. In other news, 3 men are due to appear in court charged with the murder of a businessman from Dorset. Guy Hedger was attacked in his home in Ashley early last Sunday morning. 41-year-old Jason Backus and 44-year-old Scott Keeping, both from Bournemouth, are due to appear at Poole Magistrates Court later this morning, alongside 40-year-old Kevin Downton from Dorset. A teenage racing driver who lost both of his legs in a crash says he's been overwhelmed by the support he's received from around the world. Billy Monger was racing in the Formula 4 Championship at Donington Park last month when he collided with a stationary car. Despite his injuries, he's vowed to race again, as Nick Qureshi reports.
His story has touched motorsport fans around the world, and Billy Monger, or Billy Whiz as he's known, can't quite believe global superstars have wished him well.
That's amazing. And then to turn over and there be signatures from many world champions, Lewis Hamilton, Niki Lauda, that really touched my heart.
Tragedy struck less than 3 weeks ago. Billy was racing in the Formula 4 Championship at Donington Park when he was involved in a 120-mile-an-hour collision with a stationary car. He was flown to the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham, where it was decided he'd have to have both legs amputated. Now on his birthday, Billy has thanked staff who've helped him through the ordeal.
Without them, I wouldn't be here today, so a massive thanks to every single one of the staff that have helped me.
£800,000 has been raised for Billy, and his payback will be to race again.
I definitely want to take the positives out of this and make sure that I use it in a positive way for the rest of my life now. Still got a few years left in me for sure.
Billy has celebrated turning 18 with his first legal pint. Today there'll be more cheer as this brave teenager returns to the family home in Surrey. Nick Qureshi, BBC News.
Now, traditional craft skills like sewing and painting, along with baking, have had something of a resurgence in this country. This weekend, the first ever National Festival of Making begins to celebrate Britain's manufacturing, food and creative industries. Colin Patterson has been to meet some bakers in Burnley.
And go, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and go, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and go.
Every day, 80,000 muffins and cakes are made at the Cherry Tree Bakery. That requires a lot of repetitive movement. The latest creation to emerge from their factory floor, it's Chorley Cake meets Swan Lake. The workers' actions turned into dance. The idea of making bakers in Burnley balletic came from choreographer Ruth Jones.
These machines now make the workers work really fast. So when they do mini muffin day, they're squeezed up like this and they're working really, really fast. Right. Whereas in the olden days, they could move and it was slower and they had more space.
And this is incorporated into the piece?
It's all incorporated into the piece. Wanted to be inspired by all the activity that goes on this factory floor. The movement is unique.
And it was a very collaborative process.
I showed her how to decorate brownie, that we have to take a piping bag and do circles on the brownie. It was so beautiful to see how our moves at work, what we are doing, came such a beautiful dance. It was beautiful, amazing, really.
It was great, it was really inspirational. We didn't think they could do that with just our general movements in a bakery. It's been really fun to watch and to learn.
And go, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, again, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And the idea it could be beneficial to the staff was a big part of why the bakery allowed a choreographer into the mix. There is actually method to this, that it could improve their performance.
Yeah, that's what the choreographer has said to us, that in terms of being more conscious of your movements and maybe changing the way you do it so it's a little bit better for your body.
You'd actually opted to take part yourself.
Yeah.
Any reservations?
Yeah, a lot. So I felt like I couldn't really ask them to do something I wasn't willing to do myself, so I was like, okay.
With 4 performances this weekend at the Festival of Making, let's hope the bakers will rise to the occasion.
Isn't that amazing? What's the thought? I wonder if we could try it here. Let's look at the weather prospects with Louise Lear.